Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of the Arc-Aholics. This podcast is a collection of passionate gamers talking about Arc Raiders and various related topics. All content creator guests have their channels linked in the description below. I highly recommend checking them all out, and at the end, we'll talk about the cool content we've got planned coming down the pipe. Just before we get started, here's a quick shout out to the channel supporters. These absolute legends help make this kind of content possible. Check out the links below if you're curious on how to support the channel. With that out of the way, let's get rolling. Hello everybody, my name is Gecko, and I'm your host for today's episodes of the Arc-Aholics. We have a whole host of returning guests today. No one new, all the crusty old faces that you're normally used to. We've got Rockhoundblack, our resident Embark creator. Please say hello to the audience, Rock.
Hello, and it's nice to be known as crusty and old because that's fairly accurate.
Yep, I believe so in my case, so I can only imagine. Josie, our residential technical expert, returns again this week. Josie, please say hello.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be back again. Can't wait to talk more Arc Raiders.
And itsLuve returns back from his sabbatical, doing all kinds of great things over in the Minecraft space. How has the mind been building? Say hello to the audience.
What's up, everyone? Glad to be back and glad to dig deep into these topics today.
Oh, I see what he did there. All right, so today's topics today, we're going to be ranging quite wildly from the recent info drop regarding GamesCon and the beta, or lack thereof, from Embark. We're going to be doing some talks about potential missions and quests in Arc Raiders, and a couple of other topics if we can manage to get to them. So we'll start off today with the news that we got from Embark, confirming what many of us have been talking about in this podcast for quite some time, is that we have confirmation that there will in fact no longer be any tech tests of the sort or betas of the sort between now and October 30th, and they will not be present in Gamescom. Rockhoundblack, I believe I can quote you saying that the community needs to get comfortable with the idea that there won't be a test between now and October. Hopefully I quoted you fairly accurately that one. Does it feel good to be vindicated, or is it one of those cases where you're kind of sad to be right?
I hate to say I told you so, but I told you so. I guess no surprises. I think Tech Test 2 was so polished, and we got the sense afterwards that they'd learned lots from it. So from a technical point of view, it really seems, right that they're ready to go ahead with the launch of the game without another tech test. From a marketing point of view, it really opens up the door now to go, okay, well, if you're not doing a playtest as a marketing beat, then what are you going to do? So that's going to be the interesting path now as far as the tech test goes for me.
It's a good point to be made. I do believe, Lou, your expertise is in marketing as well. Off of that, what Rockhound says, maybe you want to piggyback off that and kind of give your thoughts on that.
My main problem is, and I kind of talked about in my recent Battlefield video, is hype. Like, that's what drives games nowadays. And we had so much behind that first beta. So much was going. All these creators were talking about it. And I just hope Embark has a plan to ramp that back up closer to release date, especially when now we all know Battlefield's batting up against it. And I kind of see the similarities between the Titanfall and Call of Duty release again.
Interesting. And in regards to the technical side of things, Josie, I think you're in perfect position to give us an answer on this one, is that they did say very closely after the tech test 2 was over that they had, quote, gotten enough information. What do you think they meant by that, now that we know for a fact we're not going to have a beta test between here and there?
I got a chance to play Tech Test 2, and I played quite a bit of it, and I agree with Rockhound. It did run extremely well. I was actually surprised how well it ran. But that doesn't mean that it was perfect. There were some bugs. I think especially scouring the interwebs, I saw some console-specific bugs, it seemed like. But I do trust that Embark will iron those out, and have already ironed a lot of those out as we approach the release date. But that goes to say that, an open beta is still a chance to try to validate some of those things, make sure those fixes worked. It's hard to do that in internal play tests. But to your point, Gecko, I'm sure there were a number, and this is something we discussed in an earlier podcast, but I am quite certain that they would have had many measurable things that they were looking at from the tech test, that they were trying to test and get answers for. Things like, what's the average duration of a raid from the player base? how long from the time someone logged on to the game till the time they logged off of the game. All of those different types of metrics they would have been setting up for the tech test. And it seems like they're probably fairly happy with where those numbers were. I mean, anecdotally, I remember the first couple raids I played, I was hooked immediately and ended up playing like 10 or 12 hours that day, way too much. But I'm interested to see how those numbers actually carry over into the full release. And I know we're going to get into some more of that in a minute, but and not to be too much of an echo chamber here, but I do share the sentiment of the other people here. Like, what is the marketing plan? It doesn't seem like there is much of one. I'm sure we're going to get something, but I am also very curious. What is their marketing plan? Because we haven't gotten much on it yet.
So, Josie, I just had a question about having, potentially a playtest as a marketing beat. Like, what do you have any idea what the cost of a playtest would be for a game of this scale?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I don't have a good estimate on what it would cost Embark to do that type of test. I'm sure it is quite expensive. I don't also know the feasibility of reusing. I'm sure they're reusing the same servers and architecture that they're going to use for the full release as well. So I'm sure you could save a little bit of cost by just doing that. But yeah, it's a non-zero cost. So to your point, that is something I'm sure that they considered doing at one point in time, and they've clearly decided not to do it. But I do think that you have to weigh the potential cost of lost customers due to a lack of marketing against the costs to actually spin up and run an open beta.
I was going to add, just in addition to that, is the potential cost of fatigue for players that have played through all the playtests and they're like, okay, I've kind of played a lot of this game already and it hasn't even released yet.
Just to respond to that really quick, I was going to say I'm really interested to see how that plays out for Battlefield, because I know for myself I've really enjoyed the game, but I don't necessarily feel like I need to purchase it day one now. I feel like I kind of got a fix of it, and I might give it a little bit, wait and see if it goes on sale now. So it does have the possibility to hurt release day numbers as well. I agree.
And I'm on the other side personally, where I have not yet gotten to play Arc-Raiders. I didn't get any of the betas. And I look back on the finals, and I really do think that first hype, those first seasons, came from that open beta with all those creators and all those people and regular people without a code could hop in there. That generated so much hype in that game. I don't know how you see how that worked so well and you don't do that here.
I think I would say one difference is that the finals is a really a head-to-head competitive game, like almost like football, in a way.
Yeah.
So each match is different, whereas with Arc-Raiders, the quests are going to be similar, and there is going to be a lot more repetition compared to the finals.
Yeah, true.
Just a follow up on the Josie on the technical side of things, then we can get to the hype here in just a moment. In a manner of speaking, would this be a possibility in that they kind of use the tech test as a slice of the game that they have that's kind of like, quote, ready, right? Whereas the rest of it kind of really wasn't as polished as they like. So just kind of map out how long it took for them to get from where the rest of the game is to the polished slice, and then use the tech test to go, all right, cool, this is workable, this is usable, and now we can map out how long it would take for us to get the rest of the game to this point, and that's how they came to the conclusion that they're ready for release. Is that a possibility, or I'm just throwing smoke in the wind here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is basically how it works on a fundamental layer, is that you perform a set of tests, you get results from those tests, and then you use those results to apply it to your future roadmap. My concern with saying that, though, is that from experience, no matter how much testing you do, it never fully accounts for actually releasing your product into the wild.
Ain't that the truth?
That day one and the first week and first month, we will encounter bugs. That is just, it's something that's true of every piece of software, especially when you get it into thousands and thousands of people's hands. There will be things that need to be fixed post-release, and there's no amount of internal testing that will ever fix that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's probably true regardless if it has an open beta or not, maybe to a lesser degree, but that's one factor to that. And also, that would probably account for the fact that if they were doing that kind of math of mapping out the work it would take to get that unfinished portion of the game up to the finished level, putting in an effort to have open betas between now and October, we would probably feasibly see them not actually hitting the current year as a release date, if that was a factor, because again, that does require time, it does require effort, requires money. So in a real sense, if we were to get a beta, we probably wouldn't be getting a release this year. Would that pretty much be fair to say? I mean, hypothetically speaking.
Yeah, I think that's difficult for us to say on the outside looking in. I think that's a possibility for sure. Maybe they looked at the tech tests and said, okay, we know how much content we can release, and I'm sure they have a roadmap plan for stage releases after the initial release as well. A lot of companies will do this in terms of planning their seasonal content out way in advance because all the assets need to be created. There's usually a marketing push on that side as well, and then there's also the technical implementation of those assets. I'm sure there is a roadmap and we're not going to get everything that they've possibly created internally on October 30th, but we'll get the first slice that they've dedicated for release, and it will be most of the base game. And I assume they will continue to layer on seasonal content after that. But it's hard to say in terms of how an open beta would either negatively or positively affect that development time. Typically, those open betas are used for stressing networking and things like that. But it sounds like they feel fairly confident from their tech tests on the results they got from those types of systems.
I would certainly hope so. Of course, anything we kind of talk about here is just purely speculation. Just for the sake of transparency, I know Rockhoundblack would appreciate saying that he's part of the Embark creator program, so that transparency is there. He knows what he's allowed to talk about, what he's not allowed to talk about, so we don't have to worry about that. In regards to hype, now I know based off the conversations I've had with all of you here, we've all basically played Battlefield 6 at this point. But in regards to the hype regarding that, there's an interesting situation because if I'm being perfectly honest, when I heard of the release date, I saw that it was basically 3 weeks between Battlefield and Arc Raiders. And I couldn't help but think 3 weeks is a really, really, really long time in gamer space these days when it comes to maintaining hype. And I feel like the honeymoon period would be well and over with by that point, and the cracks would start to show. My sense with these last 2 weekends of the open beta regarding the Battlefield 6, I feel like that kind of already happened, right? I feel like the reception from the first weekend is drastically different than the reception of the second weekend. And so I think that kind of shows how fickle hype can really be when it comes to the face of like the actual game itself. And so in a lot of ways, I feel like Arc Raiders has the benefit in the sense that it doesn't quite need it to sustain it, because once people get a hold of it, they love it. And so question is more, I'm sorry if we really have a question on this one in regards to Luve. Like, has your take on Battlefield 6's first weekend and second weekend kind of been mirroring that?
100%. I mean, what we really saw them do was dive so deep to try and take that Call of Duty market. I mean, I think we're all pretty tapped in, and I just recently did a video about it, so I've kind of spoken a lot about this last week and thought about it.
Great video.
But it's too fast, and you take away your core Battlefield audience, and you're gonna lose more Battlefield people than I think COD people you're gonna take on. And it's just, I think it was a big fumble, honestly. They should have given us a big map, and they should have shown people what Battlefield can be. And I think you said it perfectly, where the first weekend it was pure hype. Oh my God, best game of the year. Not actually, but and the second weekend it was, the honeymoon phase faded.
Fairly quickly too, of my ad. I was thinking it was going to take a little longer than that, but it's sure enough, when the game can speak for itself, sometimes you don't want it to speak. Rockhoundblack, does that kind of match your experience with Battlefield? How much have you dove into it this weekend versus last weekend?
I actually haven't played it this weekend, and similar sentiments. I felt a bit exhausted after the first weekend, actually, from it. Not that I'm saying that's necessarily a bad thing.
It's because you're old, man. Admit it.
Yeah, true. There's definitely some element to that. But it certainly feels like they're going back to Battlefield 3, 4, but I totally agree that it seems like they're wanting a slice of the COD pie. And I kind of wonder if they're actually performing a little bit of bait and switch here, where they actually bait a COD audience by giving them the things that are most COD-like in the game, and then when the actual game releases, it'll be more like the other Battlefields that we know, and that'll satisfy the Battlefield audience, but it would have brought in a bunch of people that haven't played so much before.
Do you feel like they're playing with fire in that regard, though?
This is going to be the first Battlefield that I might not purchase, and I don't know how many others are like me that are just ready for a different pace of game. I actually enjoyed the slower pace of Battlefield 1 and 5 compared to the two previous titles. But I'm sure there's a bunch of people that are happy for it to swing back the other way as well.
You want to say something, Luve?
No, he wrapped it up perfectly. It's funny because I'm on the opposite side where I haven't played a bunch of Battlefield. I played a lot of Battlefield 5, interim a little bit, but I've been like a Call of Duty guy for a long time. And I think I'm the opposite where, I mean, I made a whole video about how not to pre-order, wait till it comes out, look at it, see if you like it or not. So, I mean, that's my sentiment from there is just, let's see how the actual full game is.
The weird thing about Battlefield 6 is that the first weekend, the most common sentiment that I heard from most people, it was just basically, hey, where are the big maps at? Right. And supposedly some information got put out there in the sense that, oh, it'll be next weekend. Next weekend comes and we get an even smaller map. And it's just kind of like, I don't need to see anything more. Like the rest of it I've seen, in terms of the gameplay and all that. And I wasn't particularly impressed. I'm like, okay, well, give me a bigger map so I can see Battlefield the way Battlefield's meant to be played. Larger combined arm maps, like wanted to see that. And we didn't get that. And it's, it's kind of starting to feel like they have been chasing that COD audience. And unfortunately, I don't think they're gonna get it, to be honest, or at least not enough to justify the amount of Battlefield that they're going to lose. Like, to be perfectly honest, they have so much hype behind them that they're going to do well in the space, but maybe not as well as maybe like 100 million players like many of their investors are expecting.
But that's what I also want to say too, is that with these games streak between itself, what we see with these live service shooters a lot is we see a 2-week launch, and then we see that season 1 start that 3rd week usually. So there could be a 3-week to 1 month wave of people getting into it where they wait a week and get into it. And I don't want to, even though we're all sitting here kind of again tapped in saying that like this Battlefield game might miss the mark for Battlefield, it's still going to be a behemoth in this space. It's still going to take $60 from hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people's wallets. And what is Arc Raiders doing to bring hype and bring awareness against that?
Right. But here's I think this is the key point I think a lot of people are missing in the space when they're being worried about it, is that no one in the Tarkov space is sweating bullets over Battlefield. And there's a reason for that. It's that like these are not the same audiences. Like by and large, there is some overlap because of the sheer enormity of the game in terms of like who plays shooters and who doesn't. But like they're not aiming for the same audience. Now, granted, Arc Raiders is a different situation in that a launch is a more precarious situation to be in than a game that's been established for like the better part of a decade. And also they want to be bigger in terms of they want to be more accessible. So obviously they want a wider audience. But ultimately, I think a lot of the judgments that are coming from, or rather the more harsher and more worrisome judgments that are coming from the no beta portion of it, is coming from a place of people largely not too experienced in the extraction shooter space. That may be an assumption of mine. I'm not entirely sold on that, but that's just kind of a theory I'm throwing out there because they are thinking that these games are competing directly with one another, like a Titanfall situation, whereas they're not. At least in my opinion. Josie, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I want to touch really quickly just on some of the Battlefield stuff too. I know, Gecko, you had mentioned that they did hit 500,000 concurrent players, which is pretty impressive for an open beta, by the way. Like that is actually pretty impressive. But
Yeah.
To hit 100 million total players, I think that is a very aspirational goal. I personally don't think they'll see those types of numbers. But keep in mind, there's still a lot more content to come from Battlefield and some free open content as well. I know their Battle Royale they're targeting as being a free to play section of the game. So I'm interested to see kind of how the launch evolves, especially as they start to drop more and more content. But there's also, Battlefield does have a problem that I don't think Arc Raiders suffers from. And this is probably just, I'll quantify this with my objective opinion, or sorry, my subjective opinion. But the gameplay loop for games like Battlefield and COD, for me as a player, I feel like I've evolved beyond. They're so short and they're so repetitive that I get bored with them very quickly. And I think a game like Arc Raiders could scratch this itch for a lot of gamers out there who haven't yet tried an extraction shooter where you're in this much longer game cycle. And I wonder, and it seems like we've started to move that trend. A lot of shooters like COD and even Battlefield back in the day, we started with these 6v6 arena shooters, or Battlefield did have these large open scale worlds, but every game basically contained the full life cycle of that game. And we've seen a move towards more not just storyline games, but these extraction shooter games like Tarkov, where you're chaining together multiple gameplay loops that build over a larger time frame. And even moving to a game like Battle Royale, right? You've got progression within each match. And so part of me wonders if the market dynamics are changing a little bit away from these games like Battlefield that are very repetitive within each match. And I'm curious to see what they'll do to respond to that if that is the case. But I think their numbers will be a big data point towards one side or the other with that. And I do think Battlefield will do well. I think it's a titan in the industry, and I'll definitely be tracking them as we go forward past their release to see what happens.
I think that is a trend in that direction. I believe extraction shooters are an evolution past battle royales, because I made a video briefly on this one. Basically, it's a story within the game in the sense that, you know, you can have a 6v6. I did XYZ numbers. Yay, this is how good it is this match, but you'll forget about it literally within seconds going to the next match. Whereas a battle royale, you can have a story. I mean, hey, I dropped on this location, this POI. I got these guns. We worked our way to this POI. Had gotten to this fight, and we got to the end where the circle was closing in. Like, it's a story contained within that fight, so that becomes more memorable. And then extraction shooters is just a natural, a larger evolution in that not just each individual run is a story anymore. Now you have context upon context, because you have the last one to set up the next one, which sets up the next one. So I think you're right in the sense that the market's kind of evolving a little bit more in that regard. Though there is still a huge market for the base repetitive, turn your brain off, I want to shoot and just, doing the thing. My thing though is that because they're doing the whole BR thing, and there's, I think people are giving that a lot more credit than I think I am, but it's a little late to get into the BR game at this point. And I think whatever gains they're going to get is just the losses that Warzone is leaving on the table right now. I don't think they're going to attract new players that are going to be like, you know what, man, I really want to play BRs, but Apex Legends, Fortnite, Warzone, they're not doing it for me. But this Battlefield one, that's you're going to get me into it. I don't see that happening. Rockhound, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think players who own Battlefield will enjoy that there's a BR that's added to the game. I think as a package, that's really cool. I think if you were just buying it for the BR, I think that would really struggle to be a major selling point for it. One thing I guess we should also consider is, so these two games, Arc Raiders and Battlefield, are sitting next to each other on the most wishlisted list, right? That on SteamDB, which you have to take with a grain of salt. But in the grand scheme of things, the cost for the studio for making a game like Arc Raiders might be something in the vicinity of 10 to 15% of the cost of what it costs to make Battlefield 6. So for those two games to be side by side on that most wishlisted, with Battlefield only one step higher, it feels like Arc Raiders is in a really good position, probably from the studio's point of view financially. They're feeling very hopeful about it. Battlefield 6, they're probably going, this might work well or it might not. I think there's very different scales between these two games, not only from being different games, but also from a business point of view as well.
No, I agree completely. One note I did want to make, I think the battle royale will be free in the same way that Warzone is. So that might be a way to people get that into that ecosystem. But I want to say, I'm so surprised that they didn't try and do like a EMZ or extraction shooter. Like, I honestly thought that like in 2025, 2026, that would be like the move. And that honestly, when I saw the battle royale Firestorm thing, and honestly, I was surprised by that.
I'm not, honestly. And I'll tell you why. It was because, one, they probably had their taste of it for Hazard Zone, and then they saw how DMZ kind of flopped, so they probably kind of see it as a it's not worth the effort to get in there for that space. Extraction shooters are significantly harder to balance and create and maintain than a battle royale is, just point blank. And so the cost of doing that probably just wasn't worth it, and I don't blame them.
100%. And it is EA. I just think where Call of Duty, the movement, the player style, the ethos of that game lends itself well to a battle royale. I think the movement, the ethos of like those Battlefield 1, Battlefield 5s lend themselves great to an extraction shooter. I think there's connection to be made there, obviously with a couple $100 million in between.
Oh, for sure. And they'd be competing directly with Delta Force in that regard, but that's a whole other can of worms. The thing is, though, I think, Rockhound, you said it's a great point in terms of scale, right? It's just to give an idea for people who are listening and are concerned and maybe haven't really delved into extraction games, and this is kind of your first foray into an extraction game, right? Put this in perspective. Escape from Tarkov maintains roughly, and it depends on what data you're going to get, because it's not entirely accurate because it's not Steam, roughly about 100K concurrent users, right? And they're considered the undisputed king of extraction shooters. Really, really low numbers when you're comparing it to games like Fortnite, like Call of Duty, like Battlefield. Like, And so you don't really need, they're not competing for the same share of the market. Like they're not doing it. And I think that's the key thing to understand is that Arc Raiders can sustain with significantly less numbers than Battlefield does and still do extremely well. And so I don't think it's a matter of they're going to get lost in it. It's more of a, what does that growth potential look like in the initial months? And I feel like, and I said this before in the Discord, is that I feel like come February, a lot of that hype is going to die down from Battlefield, and Arc Raiders is still going to keep on chugging along. I think this is a situation of tortoise and the hare, and they're not even racing against each other. They're not even in the same ballpark. So I understand the comparisons are being made, but I feel like these are just kind of faulty comparisons in the terms of direct comparisons. I think we all kind of talked about this last time in terms of general $60 to everybody who could potentially be playing your game. That's kind of always there.
Yeah, I can almost add to that actually, in that let's say Battlefield 6 does have a negative impact on the number of copies that Arc Raiders sells. I don't think it'll matter, because the cost for the studio making Arc Raiders, I mean, there's about 100 staff working on the game versus hundreds or even into the thousands working on.
It's close to 1,000. I did the math between the studios.
Yeah, right. That negative impact, given that Arc Raiders is probably going to be a game they're going to try and run over years, versus Battlefield might last a couple of years, maybe 3, before they put the next iteration out. I think Embark Studios won't be too concerned about any negative impact, because I think in the long run it won't actually make that much difference.
And there's another component that we haven't really talked about in regards to not having a beta that we want to get you guys' take on, is that the current market, based off of various sources that I'm looking at in terms of buying rates, and for individuals who are younger than millennials, they tend to be a lot more picky when it comes to buying the game, simply because economic reasons are forcing them to be that way. And so run into several comments that basically summarized that they won't buy a game unless they're able to play it beforehand, so they know that they'll like it. Is that alone enough of a reason for Embark to rethink their approach to this? Josie?
Yeah, really quick before I answer that, I want to chime in and just say, it's for those listening who haven't yet had a chance to play Arc Raiders, it's truly impressive what such a small team at Embark have been able to pull off. It is such a fun, exciting, unique game, and I cannot wait till release day when we can get on here and nerd out about content instead of market dynamics. But we don't have that luxury right now, so I sympathize with all of you who are just excited to get your hands on it, because it is truly impressive what Embark has done. And obviously they've got a lot of ties and overlap with DICE and EA, and it's a testament to how talented some of those people are. And so I'm really excited for everyone to get a chance to get their hands on it.
I agree. I think we'll all love the day where we don't have to grasp at straws for things to talk about. We can be like, hey, how was your first week of extracts? And we can kind of share stories and things about the game that we love. With regards to actually getting their hands on a game, I think there's a lot of people who can kind of identify with the sentiment of they want to play the game before they play it or spend $40 on it. And so that kind of sentiment may run a little wild, especially for the younger gamers. So Rockhound, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying that I've purchased a number of games that I've refunded through Steam. After 45 minutes or something, I'm just like, I can work out straight away this isn't for me. And I don't actually know how the console side of it works on that front, whether you have the option to refund if you just don't like it. Do you guys know?
I don't have a console. Luve, do you have any insight on this?
Yeah, so console itself is not as well as Steam it is. Usually the way it works is you get a refund when Sony or Xbox determines you get a refund. And the first one I remember that being was Cyberpunk back in the day, where they pretty much came out and said, hey, you can refund this game. But I think that's usually how that process works. Usually if the game is broken or stuff, but you kind of get what you get on console.
So I feel like that's probably a big factor as well in terms of where you plan to play the game. I've had this conversation online where I'm telling people, hey, dude, just play the game for less than 2 hours. And if it doesn't grip you, because essentially you're giving them $40 to hold on to while you determine whether or not they get to keep it for the next, hour and 59 minutes. And if by that point in time, you don't know whether or not that game should keep you, just ask for your $40 back and call it a day. And there's even an option on Steam that says, hey, refund reason, it wasn't fun, and so if you have any possibility of playing the game on a PC, I'd recommend at the very least spending your first 2 hours on Steam with Arc Raiders if you're holding reservations. Coming from a person like Josie was saying, coming from a person who's played this game since like 2023, you will not want a refund. I promise you. Like, you will absolutely fall in love with this game the moment you touch it. It's impressive. I understand the sentiment, but I don't feel like it's enough to say it's gonna fail in the market because it doesn't have an open beta.
I was just going to add, I guess Embark could have the option as well as actually having a free, like a free weekend once the game's launched, because I imagine almost like doing a playtest after the launch for marketing purposes. Because once they have the servers and everything up and running, I imagine the cost of doing that wouldn't be as extraordinary as it would be if they do it before launch. So maybe they will consider that if they want to try and grab more of that console market.
This is something I've got a little bit of experience with, not professionally, but more just in my own video game playing, where when you have a paid game, you always have that lever you can pull of going free to play, whether it be for a weekend or whether you permanently shift your game towards that model as well. For those of you out there that play Rocket League, it's probably the game I have the most hours in of any video game. I spent a lot of time perfecting my craft in Rocket League. But that game is a game that was paid for years and years at a time. And then eventually they got sold to Epic Games, and Epic Games did a free-to-play model with Rocket League. And I do worry a little bit about that, just in terms of bringing cheaters into the game. And while I don't think that $40 is necessarily a price point that's going to keep cheaters out of this game, I do worry about games that go free to play in the shooter space, especially after being paid for quite some time. And it's typically a sign of declined growth at that point anyways. Now, I know, Rockhound, you were just mentioning more of like a free to play weekend, which I do think could be a good lever to pull for them if they're not seeing the numbers they want. But in terms of, just thinking of all the possibilities out there that they have to grow those numbers, there's a lot of different paths they could take. But I'm like you, Gecko. I'm optimistic that I think once people get their, actually purchase this game, get their hands on it and play it, they're going to love it. And I think you're going to see social media light up again with everyone talking about it. They did pay people to play the tech tests and get a lot of popular streamers talking about it. But I feel like there was some genuine growth, naturally, organic growth and virality from the tech tests. And I think you'll see that again with the full launch. So I just hope Embark's not leaning too heavily on just that piece. Like, you still have to do traditional marketing. But I don't think an open beta is, like you mentioned at the start of this, the Chicken Little moment that everyone seems to think it is. This game will be fine without an open beta. But I do want to see more from the marketing team.
For sure. And I'm inclined to agree in regards to the level, what I perceive to be more organic, enthusiasm for Arc Raiders. It's a great example is that we're sitting here recording a podcast for a game that has not had any gameplay available to record for months at this point, and will not be released for months at this point, and it can regularly knock out thousands of views on a podcast that's an hour long. Not to mention there's other videos that come out that do even better than that. So the appetite for Arc Raider content is still strong, despite the fact that it's a completely dry desert right now when it comes to marketing or like a forward presence by Embark in regards to this game. Whereas, I can look on X right now in regards to Battlefield, it's going to be a mixed bag on what the sentiment's going to be. And despite the fact that they're probably pouring in probably $100 million in marketing right now. So I'm hopeful. And it has nothing to do with the marketing. I think it's more like the games will speak for themselves, I think, at the end of the day.
I worry about longevity here. That's my main problem, because you can have a good launch weekend and you can have a good core player base. And I know the extraction shooter is a little bit different, but I look at the finals and I look at, again, Titanfall 2, which had a core player base, but we deserved a Titanfall 3. And I know Arc Raiders doesn't need an Arc Raiders 2 and the finals doesn't need a finals 2. But when you get that dwindling player base and you don't get that like original kickstart that it deserves, the longevity of the game is, really what's at stake here. And this is a game extraction shooters should be played for a long time. It's not like that Call of Duty where you're looking for the next one in the next year or so. Like, this should be a game where in 2 years, I hope to be dropping in with new content or new something to explore. And when you don't have that player base, that's what I worry about the most.
I think the issue here is that the reason I don't think I'm really worried about that is I agree with you in that there is a longevity portion, but I think Arc Raiders will excel in that particular portion. Is that all they have to do is weather the hype of the initial launch, and they'll be perfectly fine because, it's extract shooters are designed by nature to be played longer. I find that these larger games, they pretty much run on hype. That's to take away in terms of how viable they are in terms of the market and what they play. Is that, again, I don't believe the people who are going to be playing Call of Duty or Battlefield 6 months after the release are they going to be the players who are going to be playing Arc Raiders to begin with. And so I feel like if all they have to do is just withstand the first month or two, they'll be fine. And I think Arc Raiders is in a position to do that. That's pretty much why I'm not worried about it. And some people can say I'm coping. That's fine. But time will tell.
And I think what you could add to that is that I don't think you could say that extraction shooters as a genre have a short lifespan, because Escape from Tarkov would say you're wrong if you think that way.
Heck, even Hunt Showdown will prove otherwise as well. That game has been trucking along. It had a really rough start too. It took a long while of constant content pumping in to get them to 40K players. And 40K might seem like a really low number, but in the extraction shooter space, that's more than sufficient. For people who are coming into Arc Raiders, not coming from any other extraction shooters, right, is that you have to be comfortable with a game that's not in the millions. It's not the main highlight getter outside of your bubble, because that's what an extraction shooter is. It is niche by design. It's just not going to attract that level of audience, and that's okay because it doesn't have to in order to sustain itself. And its ability to not have to sustain a bloated budget is going to be its strength, because it doesn't have to break, unlike Battlefield 6, it doesn't have to break records in order to meet expectations.
Yeah.
And I cannot wait for the day that Luve will come in here and be like, I just played Arc Raiders for the first time. Oh my God, you guys are right.
Man, I have no doubts the game will be incredible. I do love Embark, but just give me a piece of it, man.
Break him off a piece of Embark. Come on. You heard that. Break him off a piece of that.
Brother.
I have actually one question relating to all of this, which is I'd be interested to hear just briefly from each of you. What do you think the next marketing step from Embark will be that we see, and when will it happen?
All right, we'll start off with Josie.
That's such a good question, Rockhound. I've been thinking about this as well, and I truly don't know, which is kind of good and bad. I feel like there will be another trailer before release at some point. I feel like you might even start seeing, they might do another paid content creation push where you start seeing gameplay pop up on YouTube. And personally, that's what I would like to see. I would like to see creators like yourself and Shroud and all these people that we watch content of on YouTube to be able to get their hands on it and start telling us what the new updates are going to be. I don't know if they'll do that. I doubt they'll do any sort of content creator like playthroughs or anything like that. But I think at minimum we'll get a trailer.
All right, and Luve?
I mean, I'd love to see something big. I'd love to see some big old billboards in LA. I'd love to see some paid creation, maybe people, not another play test, but like I said, gameplay drops or something like that. I want to see a marketing push that the game deserves. I'll put it that way.
And for me, I think, I'm not sure this will be the entire extent of it. Obviously, I don't think it will be, but I think they'll do something similar to what they did in Tech Test 2, where they'll have the people who are part of the creative program, hopefully me soon, Embark, please add me, and have a play test where it's just them, and then allowing them to kind of try the new stuff and obviously test it in that regard, but also gain footage. So that way, maybe it's the day before release or what have you. Then they start just dropping all the content to just garner all of that hype build up, which is basically what happened for Tech Test 2. And I think you're going to see a little bit of that. Anything outside of that, I would have no idea. What about yourself, Rakan?
Seeing as I asked the question, I guess I should add my 2 cents in, which is that given that they told us they wouldn't be at GamesCon, which is in just a few days' time, that says to me that their plans obviously were after that, because otherwise they wouldn't have had to tell us that they weren't going to be there in the first place. And we already know that they have kind of a monthly cadence around the end of the month for giving us a little bit of an info drop. So perhaps this next one will be, at the end of this month or the start of September or thereabouts, will be whatever we see next as far as timing goes. And maybe it'll be a trailer with, pre-orders opening up. That kind of would be my expectation at the moment.
I really hope it is a trailer with some type of significant announcement behind it, because I feel like if they just give a trailer again, right? I think even if the entire trailer was from beginning to end of nothing but brand new content, unless there's something spectacular that they're holding behind the curtain, I don't think it's going to do them much good. I think it's better energy spent better somewhere else. But that's just me. Like, it wouldn't do anything for me. Would it do anything for the average person? I hope so, but I don't think that's the play, personally. That's just me. But hey, I'm not the professional in this regard, so take my view with a grain of salt. With that being said, we're going to move on to a fun little topic. Hopefully you guys had some chance to collect some notes and thoughts before this. It's basically missions in Arc Raiders. Now, a lot of times people, when they say, I want missions to not be repetitive, when they say things like that, they usually means they don't like fetch quests. They don't like the basic go here, gather this much of this, go there, do this much damage to these type of, PvE type situations, right? They're looking for something meatier, something bigger, something more. Obviously, those kind of missions do fill up a lot of the bulk of missions, because they're simple, they're repeatable, you can make them variable in lots of different ways. But I did say beforehand for you guys to kind of think of great missions you've had in other extraction shooters that maybe you would like, or ones that you didn't care for at all, that you never want to see in Arc Raiders. Or even missions in Arc Raiders you're like, hey, I like that, I want to see more of that, right? Who has an example that they really are excited to share?
I have kind of the opposite, if I will.
No, it's both is fair game. Go for it, Luve.
I come from World of Warcraft. I come from MMORPGs a long time. And I walk this line in my thoughts on quest design that I experienced when I tried Tarkov for the first time. And I'll make it in a way that someone who hasn't played Tarkov or WoW can understand. Let's say I needed to pick up a dog tag of a general in a woods map. What is the line between you're not giving me a pointed arrow on the ground showing me where to go, and I don't immediately just want to hop online and look up the guide to go find that dog tag? I really hope that they put a lot of time and thought into quests that are, one, engaging and not just kind of mindless, but also I would hate to see the game devolve to Google this, go there, Google this, go there. 100% a personal side of how the player decides to play that game. And some people will do that regardless, but I don't want it to be a necessary fact. And I don't want it to be the de facto way that people kind of finish the quests.
I am so happy you brought that up, because it completely reminded me of Gray Zone Warfare. For anyone who hasn't played, so Gray Zone Warfare, I believe they had, let's just say, they had way too much faith in their player base, and for the initial launch of their early access, because they're like, oh, we want you to investigate and this, that, and the other. They gave you basically no information to go off of when it came to their quests. And every single quest at that point became, cool, I'm just going to Google this, because I'm not going to sit here and go back and forth over the same block over and over and over again, looking for some obscure like thumb drive on some obscure desk in some obscure hut in the middle of this village, right? And I think you really nailed it 100%. Down to, like, you have to find a balance to it, right? I think they later on in their patches, they did fix this a bit, right? I don't think it's to the point where they needed to be, but it's okay for their game, for the way they want to do things. But I think you really, really highlighted a really important point, in that these missions, they can't be too easy, right? But if you make them too hard, you're basically just forcing people to Google, which they will do.
Yeah, and this is the thing that can totally be adjusted on a slider. You can rewrite quest dialogue. You can give me I like in MMO, I come from, again, a lot of MMORPGs. I like in MMORPGs when you give me the rough area. So like if I open my map and you can give me an outline of like, it's somewhere around here, and then in the quest it says something like he crashed his car in this area, I think it's in the glove box, then I know, okay, I'm heading this right direction. But once I'm there in, like, let's say a quarter of the map, or maybe an eighth of the map, depending on map size that goes forward, I can be like, okay, I am looking for a car in this area. And it needs to be kind of like a layered thing where you have that sense of discovery, but again, it's not like Gray Zone where it's like, find the note from the guy in this house, and you're like, there's no signs, I don't know what house this is.
It's a different language,
a sliding scale. Yes, exactly.
Right. In my position with Gray Zone Warfare at the time was, you don't have to break you can sit there and say, well, this is because of realism. Well, there's a little bit of realism in that sense that the information you got was from reconnaissance. Well, the reconnaissance can be simple as you have a faded photograph that's kind of half torn of the building, of what it actually looks like. And you go, cool, this building is somewhere in the south of that village. That's more than enough. Like, that's literally more than enough, right?
Yep.
But that does it. You don't need a grid square coordinate. You don't need an exact GPS coordinate, right? But you also don't need hey, it's somewhere in this 4-mile radius.
Yep.
Right. I think that's a great sentiment that you brought up, Luve. And then I'll let you, Rockhound, go ahead and pick it up from there.
Yeah, I was just going to add, and I think the other thing it adds, if you have that sort of lore element of go to this particular general location, then from a gameplay perspective, what it adds is that you now end up with maybe a couple of squads or a few solo players that are lingering in a location in one round, and maybe let their guard down a little bit on actually watching what's going on around them, because they're trying to figure out where this object is. And then you end up with some interesting PvP, encounters because of that.
Yep.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's kind of part of the creating intersecting maps or intersecting paths that create conflict that are organic, because you can't always account for who's on what quest and this, that, and the other. And I think that's kind of why people were frustrated with Gray Zone Warfare's approach to it, because it didn't give you hardly anything to work off of, and you were always in danger of trying to be killed by other players or even PvE, looking for the most obscure clues. So it's kind of like, that's what made it more frustrating, because you always have to have the element, hey, I might get jumped by another player at any given moment. So you can't make it require too much on a lot of things, and so you have to kind of play that balance. Josie, what about yourself? Can you think of a quest that you would really like to see, or that you saw somewhere else, or the opposite?
Yeah, my example is from none other than Arc Raiders itself. It wasn't exactly, and maybe it was, I can't remember exactly all of the quests that were a part of the game for Tech Test 2, but the Harvester puzzle is one thing that immediately came to mind when you asked us to think about these. And I asked myself, what was the difference? And I'll touch on what the Harvester puzzle is in a minute without giving too many spoilers away. But I thought to myself, what was different between things like the Harvester puzzle and the more traditional tasks or quests that we were tasked with, like go here, find X, or pick up Y from this location. And it was the interactability with the map and how it dynamically changed things around you. And for those that don't know, the Harvester puzzle was essentially just a part of one of the maps. And if you've seen any gameplay, the Queen, the biggest arc that we've seen so far, be interactable with in the game, protects it. And there's a puzzle inside that you have to do in order to get weapons and blueprints and things like that. But it was the dynamic nature of, one, it's a puzzle, so you're trying to figure it out in real time while you're there, and there's the added danger of the Arc and the other raiders around you who also could be trying to do the same puzzle, and there's always the looming threat of death everywhere, and that's kind of what keeps the tension in Arc. But also just the variability of I did the puzzle multiple times, and it's even though I knew how to solve it, it was still kind of a fun interactive challenge each time and kept me coming back. And I never really had that experience with the more quest tasks that we were charged with, where it was, go here and do X, or go to the pharmacia and pick up this page on the table. I never got that dopamine hit from those interactions. And I think they were just too basic. I agree with Rockhound. You do end up kind of lingering in areas, and sometimes you have some unique moments with other players who are also trying to do those tasks. But you also get those moments from these more interactive quests or bigger, almost map event based quests. So I would like to see them lean into that side of things more. Tied in with the arc, tied in with the lore. We touched on this in an earlier podcast too. I'm not exactly someone who craves lore in these types of video games, but there's a large percentage of players who do enjoy that. And so I think the more background you can give on Speranza and tying it in with characters down there, or even with your own character, I think that would be a big hit with a lot of players.
I think I can kind of summarize a little bit what you're kind of honing in on here, is that there's a difference between a quest where you go to a place, look for a thing, and then you just press the interact button, and then you're done, versus you go to a place, you're looking for an object, and you find that object, but then you have to take that object and you have to put it somewhere to activate something, and then you have to actually activate it, and then you have to look for the thing that is connected to it in order to calibrate it, in order to actually make it work. And these are all at semi-close positions, but not exactly on top of each other. All while you're doing this and you're creating noise and you're seeing semi-vulnerable, and that's a big difference between those two types of quests. I think I'm pretty much nailing this feeling for you right now, Josie, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a feeling of, like you said, they're not too hard to the point where you necessarily need to look them up. I'm sure some players did, but you don't necessarily have to. They're pretty easy to figure out on your own. And you get a real feeling of, you get that dopamine hit when you solve the puzzle. And even if you already know the puzzle, there's still the interactions with the Arc. There's still the looming threat of the other players in the area while you're taking time to do something, and you're interacting with the environment. And so I just feel like it's a lot more fun. It's a lot more engaging. And I definitely prefer that style over, like you said, go here and press a button to interact with a page on the table.
There's a mission in Buried City where that's the case, where you have to go there, you have to grab a battery, put it in a generator, activate the generator, and then align an antenna, right? An antenna is like on top of a roof somewhere. The battery is separate from where the generator's at. Like that kind of stuff, like they need to do more of, right? They need to absolutely do more of that kind of stuff. So I think that's a great example. I'm thinking of an example from the Cycle Frontier, is where you have to go to one of the maps, go to a specific location, find a unique item, grab that item. It cannot be in your safe pocket. Extract with that item, and then you have to take it to a second map and then deposit it somewhere on that particular map. I thought I wasn't gonna like that kind of quest, but in the end, I kind of enjoyed it. Rockhound, what do you think about that?
Yeah, you've described the sort of quests that I really hope they add a number of, which is complex quests that involve multiple maps, multiple actions, and might even be spread out over a significant amount of time. Like I really like the idea of maybe them having a few quests that maybe take up the entire season, and not everyone will complete them. I'm sure that will bring some frustration for some people if they work all the way through and don't manage to do it. But I'd like to see that a few of those longer term ones in there. And I also really like how the quests are really quite well connected to the lore. In fact, it made me a bit sad. I was watching a few streamers when they would go to the trader and they would just skip through all the voice lines to quickly find out what the quest was and go off and do it. And I was like, oh, actually, you're almost missing out on a really cool part of the game where the quest is actually really neatly tied into the lore, and listening to the trader explain to you why they want you to do this particular thing. You're actually starting to learn about their backgrounds as well, which I really liked. They're the two key things for me, that there's a good lore connection and that we have some complexity that covers multiple maps in the quests as well.
For sure. I'm a little guilty of that myself, but I was looking at it from a perspective of like, this is a very short tech test. I can get a soak in the lore once it's actually released, but having been playing this game since 2023, I know the time I had in that game would be fleeting. So having known that, I'm here for no muss, no fuss. I'm getting right back into that raid as fast as I can. And I knew full well I can get into this lore much later once it actually is completely polished at that point. But I understand what you're coming from in the sense that that's kind of, we ask for that. Like, I mean, I remember asking for that in the Cycle Frontier where all we got was text and that was it, And then, I was like, dude, if you just voice acted these things, it'd be so much more compelling. And here they are voice acting it. I'm just going to skip right past it. I think we talked about this a little bit briefly. There are quests that are out there that are so horrendous that it's almost like you'd rather just not do them. Like it was just, you're fine with being stuck. And there was this one particular quest. Those of you who played the Cycle Frontier back in the day can probably remember this one. Where you had to gather and turn in 3 Savage Marauder flesh. For the uninitiated, Savage Marauders were among the hardest PvE to deal with in terms of their HP, their deadliness. They were such a pain in the ass to deal with. And to top it off, the item that you needed to have them drop was a rare drop. So, and when there's a storm in the actual map, which happened, I think, every 30 minutes or something like that. My memory is going to escape me on this one. But like it happened for 5 minutes. And if you killed them during that storm, the probability of them dropping it at a higher rate, it was increased, right? It wasn't guaranteed, but it was increased. Not to mention the fact that because they're some of the hardest PvE, they're always in some of the hardest areas. And they will tend to attract, because of how long they took to kill, they would attract players constantly. So let's just say it was such a frustrating experience. I found myself going, you know what? I'm far enough along on this faction's progress that I really don't care anymore. I'm just going to go ahead and just stop, trying to waste materials, trying to get this damn quest done. And so I feel like that's always a possibility when you're building a quest that is super frustrating to do. And that doesn't mean they have to be gimmies, but I think at a certain point I go, you know what? Let me just not do this quest. And let me just go, loot the map for a bit. Let me just go explore and just do other things, get key rooms, do all these other things that I've been kind of holding off on. Let me just do that instead. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's not. That's also a frustration point too. So I'm hoping we don't see anything like that in the Arc-Raider side of things.
Just to add to the maybe not a quest that I don't want to do, but one that was not well balanced, at least from Tech Test 2, there was a mission where you had to get so much Raider damage, and they split them up too, right? There was like these mastery challenges, and then there were also like the actual tasks or quests that you had to do, but I kind of consider them all the same. They're things that they're trying to encourage me to do to keep the gameplay varied. And one of them was you had to do so much damage to other Raiders in a single raid. And it was just the amount of damage you actually had to do was so much that I saw some streamers basically just cheese it by downing a Raider, having them heal themselves, and then just doing more damage to them again. And so I really hope that a lot of the data they got from the first, especially Tech Test 2, but even from previous tests, that they are dialing all of those numbers in so that when we get to the actual release, there aren't any quests where people feel like they need to cheese, or even some that might be bugged out or just entirely impassable altogether. And so
Yeah.
I have a high confidence level that Embark will balance all those things, but those are the types of things I think that really can ruin the first week of release too, as the top players start running into those things.
Yeah, and I think it was a Hideo Kojima quote I said in the very first episode, where given enough time, players will optimize the fun out of everything. And the game designers really need to think of a way of like, hey, is this going to be optimized, or is it going to be like a fun thing to do the way it's meant to be done?
Right. And I took issue with the fact that it wasn't just an achievement. It also came with pretty significant rewards too. That was my biggest thing. It's like, it'd be one thing to say, hey, I get this achievement for doing XYZ damage to Raiders. Cool. It's a notable achievement. Maybe you get something like worthwhile in terms of like something to show off. But no. These were like game altering rewards. These were like Tempest recipes. These were Bobcat recipes. These were Snap Hook recipes. These were literally game changing recipes that players got for doing these really difficult tasks that you generally had to have 3 really high level experienced individuals effectively cheesing their way through it. I really hope you're right and they dialed that in, because to me, when I saw that, I was actually kind of mortified. It's like, hold on. Tempest, which was at that point the strongest gun in the game, by far, bar none, was tied to getting 1,200 damage in a single raid, which, like you said, pretty much only the top end streamer guys who have access to a bunch of high level stuff at that point already and have 2 other individuals who also have the exact same setup could do. But then you gave them the best gun in the game, or the recipe to make the best gun in the game on top of that. I felt like I was just mortified when I saw that. So I hope they rectify that.
There's some interesting sort of data that's coming to light. There's I guess you call him a content creator. On Reddit, he's Kim B. Larson, but he actually also has the Arc-Raiders maps Instagram. So shout out to him, because those maps are amazing. But he did some data analysis, and long story short, do not underestimate the value of completing quests. Like he looked at a whole bunch of streamers, and the ones that myself included, and the ones that advanced the most, the fastest, were those that focused on completing quests. And there's lots of data you can dive into when you look at his posts on Reddit, and it's awesome that he's done it. But I think quests are going to play a much bigger role in the game than perhaps people initially sort of realized.
I think us old Cycle Frontier heads will kind of sympathize with that, because that was the same way in that game. And so we kind of figured that out right away. Like, hey, prioritize your quests first and foremost so you can get the unlocks as fast as you can. And in that game's case, you actually unlocked the access to buy guns and better guns the more advanced you were in XP. So big incentives in that regard. All right, and guys, at this point in time, looks like about the hour mark here. I want to thank everybody for showing up, everyone for kind of bringing their passion to this conversation. Everyone who's listening, we hope you enjoy the conversations. All the content creators here, all of their links will be in the description. I highly encourage you all to check them out. They're going to be putting out tons of great content for you guys to dive into between now and October 30th and beyond. We're going to give each content creator a chance to kind of like give us a little tease of what's coming down the pipeline. itsLuve, what can we look forward to in the next for your next drop into the YouTubes?
Well, I just released a video about why you shouldn't pre-order Battlefield and why you should probably pre-order the Arc Raiders when it comes out, or the pre-order comes out. But I don't know. Might be playing more Minecraft, maybe some Magic the Gathering, maybe some James Bond Agent Under Fire on PlayStation 2. We'll have to see.
Fantastic. Rockhoundblack, well, I know you had that excellent video about dispelling the myths of Arc Raiders, and you're working on a part 2. Can you give us a little look behind the curtain for what's coming down the pipe?
Yeah, so part 2 will have we'll be dispelling some myths and rumors, but I'm also going to put in some facts about the game that people might not know, and 2 that I'll include this time are how many players are in a round, or at least how many aren't in a round, if that's the best way to put it. But I'd be interested if you've watched the podcast all the way through to this point, write in the comments how many players do you think are in each round of Arc Raiders in total. And I'm also going to give a little fact about why Scrappy was added to the game, the rooster.
Ooh, I'm intrigued about why they decided to put cock in Arc Raiders. On my side of things, I'm going to be putting out a video in regards to the free loadout system that Arc Raiders has, how I believe it is extremely well built, despite the fact that it is simple. And I'm going to use other examples to analyze what we learned from previous titles and what Arc Raiders is doing that's going to make them stand out in a different way. Hope you guys enjoy that. And at this point, I believe as the time you guys will be listening to this, we'll have 74 days left between when you're listening to this and when Arc Raiders is going to be released. Rockhoundblack, I'll let you send this out.
74 days. That's going to go quickly, I think, especially if we get a marketing update soon.
And real quick, hold on. That means we are farther from the tech test than we are from the release.
That's a good feeling. We're on the downhill slope. Anyway, once again, thanks for having me on board, and everyone enjoy the rest of their day, and kia kaha, stay strong.